On November 28, 2001, officers from the Newport Richey Police Department in Florida responded to a 911 call from a residence in the 4700 block of Sanctuary Way. When they arrived on the site, detectives found an adult male's deceased body inside the room of an unfinished apartment. Simon Clarke was named as the man. According to an autopsy conducted by the medical examiner's office, Simon had multiple blunt force trauma injuries to his face and chest, and he had been murdered. Investigators at the time interviewed several prospective witnesses and identified a person of interest, but they kept that individual's identity a secret. The weapon was discovered, but no leads were found when it was processed. The case was not reopened until 2004 because no arrests were made. Simon Clarke's case was revived in May 2016. A number of witnesses were re-interviewed by investigators, and they revealed more information about what they remembered happening before and after the incident. It was also possible to locate another witness who was present when the crime was committed. Jason Acevedo is the individual. Acevedo approached the detectives and claimed to have witnessed the fatal bat strike on Simon Clarke. Randy Petersilge was the man's name, he mentioned. Acevedo further informed the investigators that he would take part in Petersilge's prosecution since he had been dealing with the incident's memories ever since it occurred. Acevedo asserted that he was originally reluctant to speak up because Petersilge had had him use the bat to strike Simon Clarke as well. Denise Sanders, another witness, supported Acevedo's account. According to Sanders, Petersilge confessed, who claimed she spoke with him after the crime. She added that because Randy Petersilge forced Jason Acevedo to strike him with the bat as well, Acevedo wouldn't be able to testify against him. In 2001, Petersilge's boyfriend and Simon Clarke's friend and business partner recruited Sanders as the general contractor to build their new house. After a couple of months, an engineer notified Clarke's acquaintance that Sanders had billed him more than $300,000 for labor that had cost about $100,000. Sanders would not be receiving any extra donations, and Clarke's buddy requested Clarke to let Sanders know about this while she was away in England. Sanders allegedly entered the home with Acevedo holding a baseball bat and attacked Simon Clarke after informing Petersilge that no more money would be paid. Authorities claim they found evidence that Sanders was stealing money from Clarke's acquaintance and using it to buy drugs, noting that both Acevedo and Petersilge had a history of drug-related felonies. According to the detectives, Petersilge's motivation was Clarke's friend's refusal to make a larger payment. The case was presented to the Pasco County State Attorney's Office with the testimony of the new witness. In 2018, prosecutors brought the matter to a grand jury, which later handed down an indictment accusing Petersilge of murdering Simon Clarke. After Petersilge entered a not guilty plea, the case was tried in November 2022. After then, the jury found Randy Petersilge guilty. He will be sentenced soon. It's important to note that Petersilge has committed other crimes before. He was found guilty in 2015 of having a firearm while a felon and was sentenced to 42 months in federal prison. Cheryl Thompson, a 19-year-old who lived in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1978. She was a freshman at the University of Cincinnati and left her home on March 24, 1978, to meet her boyfriend at a disco but never arrived there. 2 weeks later, on April 8, her body was found by a state wildlife official on the bank of the Little Miami River in Loveland, Ohio. She had been strangled and assaulted. Cheryl was not the only one, as from October 1976 to April 1978, at least 4 young women, 3 of them teenagers, suffered the same fate as Cheryl, all in the Cincinnati area. The crimes terrorized the region and were not solved. All investigators could do was collect male DNA from Cheryl's body and wait for DNA technology to get more advanced. In 2022, investigators took a new look at the case and sent the male DNA sample to a private genealogy company in hopes of identifying a suspect. The results pointed to a specific family tree, and one of the men in the family was Rolf Howell, who was a long-haul truck driver and a newspaper delivery man for the Cincinnati Enquirer. Howell lost his life in his mid-30s in a car accident in 1985. When investigators took a closer look at Rolf Howell, they discovered that he had been arrested in 1983 after he picked up a woman on the side of the road and offered a ride home in a newspaper delivery vehicle. At some point, he started strangling her, but she, fortunately, managed to fight him off and escape. When investigators discovered the case, they contacted Mr. Howell's family members, who submitted DNA samples. The DNA samples indicated that the male DNA found on Cheryl's body was from a close relative. Investigators exhumed Howell's body and extracted a DNA sample from his jawbone, which matched the DNA found back in 1978. Joseph T. Dieters, who was the Hamilton County prosecutor, said that investigators met with Cheryl's family and told them that the man who took her life was no longer alive, but that they would present the evidence to a grand jury if the family wanted further closure. The family accepted the offer, and a Hamilton County grand jury indicted Ralph Howell. Joshua Dressler, a professor emeritus of law at Ohio State University's Michael E. Moritz College of Law, said that the indictment of a person known to not be alive anymore is exceptionally rare in the United States. There are a number of reasons why this might be done, he said in an email. First, it demonstrates to the family of the victims that the prosecutor treated the matter with seriousness. It is, at a minimum, a sense of justice for the family. Joseph Dieters said investigators believed that Mr. Howell might have taken the lives of at least 3 other women, Charmaine Stoya, Nancy Ann Theobald, and Victoria Hincher, who were found in Hamilton and Butler counties between 1976 and 1978. All 3 of the women had been assaulted and strangled. Betty Lou Zukowski lived in Hampton County, Massachusetts, with her parents Stanley and Mildred Zukowski. The last time Betty Lou's family saw her alive was on May 26, 1966, at around 6 p.m. when she left their home on Front Street in Chicopee to take a phone call from someone she claimed was one of her girlfriends. When she did not come home, her parents reported their daughter missing to the Chicopee Police Department. Approximately a week after Betty Lou's body was recovered, investigators were able to develop a composite sketch from 2 witnesses, one of whom they believed to be the last person to have seen Betty Lou, because they believed she knew the person who took her life. Otherwise, she would not have left her home after receiving the phone call. They theorized that she met up with this person and ended up in West Springfield after riding in a vehicle driven by someone she knew. Recently, the district attorney's Unsolved Cases team took up the case and discovered that information linking Donald Morris to the crime was given to the West Springfield Police Department in 1977 from a number of sources. Further interviews led to the case being brought before a grand jury. The district attorney's office declined to say what information connected Morris to the crime or whether any new physical evidence surfaced before the case was presented to the grand jury. When Betty Lou's life was taken, Morris was 17 years old. He was arraigned in Hampton County Superior Court on November 3, 2022, and he is presently being held without bond. Morris is scheduled to reappear in court in May 2023. According to a statement made by Hampton District Attorney Anthony Gelini, the office has been in contact with certain members of Betty Lou's extended family. One of them had served as a pallbearer at Betty Lou's funeral in 1966. Regrettably, Betty Lou's parents have passed away and will not be able to witness Donald Morris being held accountable for the alleged crime against their daughter. The process of seeking justice for Betty Lou and her family has begun, with the aim of bringing closure to their ordeal. However, it must be acknowledged that even though justice is sought, it cannot undo the harm inflicted upon Betty Lou, and her potential as a healthy adult was tragically cut short. Morris has a long history of abusing children, and because of this, he is classified as a Level 3 offender, meaning that the public is at significant risk of him committing new crimes. Alexis Jean Lopez lived in Oxnard, California in 2017. She grew up in Santa Paula and Camarillo and graduated from Camarillo High School. On October 8 of 2017 at 9:45 p.m., Alexis was in the driver's seat of a Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck waiting to turn left from Ventura Boulevard onto Santa Clara Avenue. An acquaintance, a 27-year-old Oxnard man, was sitting next to her while they waited in the left turn pocket for the light to change. Alexis and the man were then both shot multiple times in a drive-by shooting as they sat in the truck. Alexis was fatally shot, but her passenger was hospitalized and survived. Alexis left behind 2 young children. According to Sergeant Edgar Fernandez, who worked on the case, Fernandez said that he and others consistently worked on the case over the years where new information would come in slowly and keep them going in the right direction. A recent addition of the new evidence led police to arrest Jacob Jamal Steer, 25, of Oxnard in October of 2022. Steer had already been in custody since September of 2022 for violating his post-release supervision from a prior assault conviction. Steer appeared in Ventura County Superior Court on October 24 of 2022 for arraignment on the charges against him. He did not enter a plea and is due to return to court on November 21st. He was rebooked into custody and remains at Todd Road Jail in lieu of a $1 million bail. The police investigation is still ongoing. Fernandez said they expect to make at least one additional arrest. Anyone with information can call Detective Ken Taucus at 805-200-5669. The city of Oxnard offers a $25,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest and conviction in this case. Fernandez said that the shooter and the victims did not know each other. He believed the motive was more than likely a case of mistaken identity rather than a random act of violence. The Lewisburg Police Department received a call in June 2007 reporting the disappearance of 53-year-old James Johansen in West Virginia's Greenbrier County. Since no one had seen or heard from him for a while, his friends, family, and neighbors became worried. Throughout the course of the following 14 years, multiple West Virginia state troopers conducted a thorough investigation before a break in the case materialized. In September 2021, the Greenbrier County Sheriff's Office was alerted about the discovery of skeletal remains close to Muddy Creek Mountain. The remains and other evidence were gathered at the crime scene by the Greenbrier County Sheriff's Office Crime Scene Team and the Lewisburg Detachment of the West Virginia State Police. The remains were subsequently identified as being those of James Johansen after the Greenbrier County Sheriff's Office completed a crime scene investigation. Based on the discovery of his body and the earlier investigative report, they continued the investigation. Troopers sent a report on their investigation to Pat Villa, the county prosecutor in Greenbrier, after following up on both fresh and old leads. Based on the findings, Villa made the decision to submit the investigation to the Greenbrier County Grand Jury in October 2022, which led to Charles Michael Cason Kessinger's indictment. In October 2022, West Virginia state troopers drove to San Antonio, Texas, where the Texas Rangers and Texas Department of Public Safety detained Kessinger at his residence. Kessinger is now being held in the Southern Regional Prison after being extradited back to West Virginia by the West Virginia State Police. Authorities stated that robbery was the reason Kessinger killed James, but they did not elaborate on how they came to that conclusion. In 1982, Archie Rutherford and his wife Eleanor resided in Spokane, Washington. During a weekend vacation to Seattle, Eleanor Rutherford returned on May 25, 1982, to find her husband Archie Rutherford gone. His body, which had numerous wounds, including several stab wounds to his neck, was discovered by her in the bedroom. Moreover, stolen goods were discovered, pointing to a possible robbery motive. The level of excessive violence utilized was consistent with the type of wrath more frequently seen in domestic abuse scenarios. 8 hours after Eleanor called the police, the Honda was located, and detectives were able to collect fingerprints from the vehicle that belonged to an unidentified male. Authorities eventually discovered that on May 24th, Archie transported the Honda to Pontiac City for maintenance. A second examination of the evidence in 2022 resulted in the arrest of 62-year-old Tracy Pruitt in Los Angeles in November of that year. DNA from the crime scene had been acquired that belonged to the perpetrator. In 1982, Pruitt was accused of killing Archie Rutherford. He was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison in Ohio for assault and robbery. Because there was no proof that the two knew one another, investigators concluded that this was a random act. Pruitt is now being held in detention in California while awaiting extradition to the state of Washington. Michael C. Schumeister, age 45, was a resident of St. Petersburg in the state of Florida. He was discovered dead on August 14, 1997, outside of the Mirror Lake Library, which was about a half-mile from his residence. The fact that his pockets had been rifled through suggested that someone had attempted to steal from him. According to the findings of the medical examiner's investigation, he had sustained blunt force damage to the head and the neck. Patricia Morris, a woman with a long criminal history, was recognized as a person of interest early on in the investigation. This was due to the fact that she had been drinking with Michael at a bar the night before he passed away, which led investigators to believe that she may have been involved in Michael's death. However, she denied any involvement and passed away in 2010 after being questioned about it. In 2016, authorities decided to reopen the investigation and take a new look at the evidence, including Michael's genes, which were analyzed for DNA. On November 2, 2022, the DNA that was located on the inside of the front and rear jeans pockets was recognized as belonging to Patricia Morris. This led the detectives to believe that the case was closed, as Patricia Morris is no longer living at this time. The members of Michael's family have been briefed on the latest developments. On January 19, 2013, someone called 911 about gunshots at 7:26 p.m. at the Crescent Landing apartment complex in Greenville County, South Carolina. Deputies found the body of 47-year-old Edward Goldsmith in the parking lot of the apartment complex on White Horse Road. Unfortunately, witnesses were not helpful and there wasn't much to go on, so the case went cold. Then, in March of 2022, two brothers were arrested and charged with taking the life of Edward. The brothers' names are Blessis Dravius McKinney and Deontay John Mel McKinney. Greenville County Sheriff Hobart Lewis said the brothers lured Edward to the apartment complex because they felt that they were ripped off during a drug deal. Hobart Lewis said the advancement in technology helped solve this cold case. Utilizing the various technological advancements, the cold case unit was able to piece together critical evidence that, along with new witness testimony, allowed them to identify the McKinney brothers as the responsible parties. The brothers are currently in the Greenville County Detention Center and Kershaw Prison, respectively. On May 22, 2019, after receiving a 911 call about a deceased adult female discovered there, deputies from the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office in Texas were sent to the heavily wooded area of the Sam Houston National Forest. The female was later identified as 59-year-old Rhonda Richardson, a corrections officer with the Polensky unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice at the time. Rhonda lived very close to the area where her body was found. A set of ATV tire tracks were discovered adjacent to the body, according to San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Gary Sharpen. He also noted that it was odd for Rhonda to be in the woods considering her fear of snakes and other wildlife. Rhonda's dogs had gotten lost in the National Forest the day before, according to Gary Sharpen, who was involved in compiling a timeline of the events leading up to her body being found. Rhonda then went around asking some of her neighbors to assist her to seek the dogs. Robert Dale Clary, a neighbor of hers, was one of the volunteers. According to Sergeant Gary Sharpen, Clary was the last person seen with Rhonda according to many witnesses. It has been reported that Clary was the one who discovered Rhonda's death, but instead of immediately calling 911 to report it, he did not take any action. He did not even stop and contact the authorities, which was considered unusual and bizarre. Clary informed several family members about the discovery, and he even brought his nephew to the scene and instructed him to call 911. Clary was suspected by authorities of being responsible for Rhonda's death, and investigators were able to gather new information that put both Clary and Rhonda in the same location where she was found. However, they lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest. Recently, a witness in the case was located, providing the necessary evidence to obtain a warrant for Clary's arrest. In November 2022, 65-year-old Robert Dale Clary was arrested and charged with killing Rhonda and leaving her body in the woods. Clary had previously been found guilty of indecency with a child in 2007 and had been convicted of 3 different driving while drunk offenses. He is currently being held in the San Jacinto jail on a $750,000 bond. Akia Eggleston, then 22, resided in Baltimore, Maryland, in 2016. She was 8 months pregnant and already had a daughter. Michael Robertson, the father, was 36 years old and a Baltimore resident at the time. On May 7, 2017, when she skipped her own baby shower, Akia's family members reported her missing. Further research revealed that Akia was last seen alive on the afternoon of May 3, 2017, 4 days prior to her being reported missing. A timeline of the events leading up to her disappearance was determined by the investigators, and Michael Robertson, the father of her unborn child, was also given more attention. When Robertson's grandma watched Akia as a young child in the 1990s, they first connected. In 2016, they reconnected, and they started dating. Robertson was also dating a 22-year-old lady at the same time. The second child for the couple had just lately been delivered by that woman. Detectives discovered that she believed she would be moving in with Robertson and was looking forward to it. On May 2nd, Robertson emailed her images of an apartment's interior along with 2 money orders for $450 that she had withdrawn from her savings account many times. Later, Akia informed Robertson via Facebook that she had phoned him and that the money order had arrived. She made 2 failed attempts to use an ATM at a downtown Wells Fargo facility that afternoon. On May 3rd, Akia and Robertson began exchanging texts. On that particular day, Akia was captured on surveillance footage depositing 2 money orders together with her employer's check at a BB&T branch in the financial area. She then took out $450. The property manager only accepts cash, so Akia informed a bank employee she knew from high school that she had to cash the orders. It's likely she was talking to the home Robertson had informed her they would be moving into. Around 4 o'clock, Robertson rode in a Lyft that she had requested to the Cherry Hill neighborhood. According to phone records, Robertson was in the vicinity of Akia's house between 5:35 and 6:18 p.m. She texted a friend an invitation to her baby shower the following Sunday at around 5:22 p.m. It was her last known exchange of words. According to phone records, she received a telemarketing call at 6:57 p.m. Her phone and Robertson's phone were both downtowns at the time. The activity on her phone stops there, indicating that the phone has been disabled or turned off. Investigators discovered the apartment picture Robertson had submitted the day before was a totally different home from the one he had specified using a reverse image search. The night before she vanished, Robertson and the mother of his children got into a heated dispute, according to information gathered by investigators. As police examined what might have prompted the fight, they discovered that she had uploaded a sonogram photo on Facebook that evening. Family members claimed that they arrived at Akia's flat on the day of her shower to find it almost completely empty. This was initially seen by police as a sign that she had fled alone. It was before they discovered that Akia had been duped into thinking Robertson and she would move in together. Robertson was questioned numerous times throughout the inquiry, but it is noteworthy that he consistently showed a pattern of avoiding or hiding from authorities for weeks or months at a time in between interviews. He said in an interview on June 15, 2017, that he had seen Akia on May 1st, but the phone records show that this is untrue. In July 2017, a police official stated that the inquiry would go on until justice was done for Akia and her pregnant child because it was no longer believed that she had walked off on. The tragic story of Akia Eggleston serves as a reminder of the terrible effects that domestic abuse can have on victims and their families. It also serves as a reminder of the significance of rigorous investigations, tenacity, and assistance for victims' families as they work to bring those who have been taken from us to justice. In the wake of this awful tragedy, we can only hope that Akia's family and loved ones find some sort of peace and closure. When deputies from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office arrived at the Nature's Trail Mobile Home Park in Theresa, Florida, early one July morning in 2007, they found a horrific scene there. The park's co-owner and resident Jonathan Burns contacted 911 to report being stabbed after a dispute with a tenant. The body of Toynia and Aughtman, 41, was then discovered by deputies outside a rented mobile home. She had been stabbed 4 times in the chest and had a huge laceration on her neck. Toynia was discovered by deputies lying on her back on the ground next to her mobile home. Investigators discovered possible blood beside a trash can and blood that led back to the Burns family home, both of which were about 29 feet from her corpse. A bloodied knife was discovered by the investigators. At the time, forensic examinations revealed a match between Burns' DNA profile and the blood on the ground and the knife. An autopsy revealed that Toynia died as a result of chest stab wounds that reached her heart and lungs. Burns, who was 43 at the time, suffered 2 abdominal wounds. He admitted to stabbing Toynia, according to the detectives. He was brought to Tampa General Hospital to have surgery on 2 mid-abdominal wounds. Investigators noted that his fingers appeared to have minor lacerations, and that both of his arms appeared to have scratches. Detectives began to question Burns' claim of self-defense when they discovered Toynia used a wheelchair and a walker to move around and might be shaky on her feet. The state attorney's office received the case, and after reviewing the facts, came to the conclusion that Burns' account of the events could not be refuted. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit began reviewing the case again in 2021. The day after Toynia was stabbed on January 14, 2022, a detective returned to Jonathan Burns' house in the park to speak with him. Burns told the cops that he had consumed a lot of alcohol that evening, and Toynia began to yell at him as he made his way to the laundry room to close it. He claimed that after approaching Toynia's trailer, she hit him in the stomach. Afterward, Burns claimed he discovered he was bleeding. He claimed Toynia had no weapons and had never taken his knife, but he believed she stabbed him. A witness who claimed to have information on a 2007 cold case contacted the sheriff's office more than a week after that interview. The witness stated during an interview with a detective that Burns had contacted her in the mobile home park on January 14th after the detective told her he knew he had done something wrong and wanted to face it. Burns allegedly told the witness that Toynia had a disability. The witness also claimed that Burns handed her a document that was signed and detailed what occurred at the moment, which she then gave to the detective on January 25, 2022. The witness got in touch with the detective once more 2 days later. This time, the witness claimed Burns approached her and admitted to writing the letter in self-defense because he believed he would do less time. Burns allegedly informed the witness that Toynia had received what she deserved and that he did not feel bad about it. A second statement made and signed by Burns that refuted the first statement was provided to the investigator by the witness the next day, on January 28. There were discrepancies between the letters and what Burns was telling the witness and her son, who questioned Burns. Burns then provided the witness a third statement that he had written and asked her to give it to the police. Burns asserted that he stabbed himself in the stomach after the encounter, thinking it would be effective self-defense in the third statement. He said he noticed Toynia on the way to the laundry room and went back home to collect his knife before approaching her. Burns claimed that when they got into a battle over the knife after an argument, he stabbed Toynia multiple times and slit her neck when she tried to leave. Burns acknowledged his dislike for Toynia and his plans to harm her that evening as he closed the letter. The message read, "I am accountable for this dreadful event. I wish I could make it different." Investigators were able to identify Burns by a latent fingerprint on one of the statements and the information provided in the third statement, which is consistent with the evidence found at the crime scene. As a result, on February 2, 2022, deputies detained 58-year-old Jonathan Burns at his house in the park that he still owns. His bond was set by a judge in Tampa at $50,000, and he is currently in the waiting period for trial. A baby's body was discovered inside a trash bag on April 29, 2009, close to the Wisconsin hamlet of Theresa. Both the newborn and the bag and its other contents, as well as the bag itself, allowed officers to collect DNA evidence. Investigators suspected that the child's mother was the source of some of the DNA that was found, but it was later proven to belong to a close female relative. The infant was female and Caucasian. 2 days later, a county medical examiner conducted an autopsy on the body and discovered the infant had died either before or during birth. At the time, baby Theresa was given that name by detectives trying to find any relatives of the infant in the neighborhood where she was discovered. On May 11, 2009, baby Theresa was laid to rest after investigators were unable to locate anyone connected to her. The Lowell Cemetery in southwest Dodge County was filled with mourners even though no family members attended her burial. The Cornerstone Funeral Home's Todd Michael and his crew contributed money for the funeral service. The service was led by Timothy Bauer, chaplain for the sheriff's office. In order to prevent a 6-year-old statute of limitations for the charges from expiring, officials filed a charge against the unidentified mother's DNA profile in 2014. This effectively allows them to prosecute the mother when they ultimately identify her. In 2021, because to recent advances in DNA technology, detectives were able to positively identify baby Theresa's parents. Corrine Lieutenant, who is 45 years old, is the mother. She was interviewed by investigators in March 2021. According to Lieutenant, she didn't find out she was expecting until several months into her term. When she gave birth to the child at home, she claimed to be in denial. She informed authorities that after the child was born, the umbilical cord was wrapped around its neck, so she placed the infant's body in a garbage bag and then drove aimlessly along what is now U.S. Route 41. The baby's body was then placed in a bag and abandoned by Lieutenant in a wooded location she had discovered adjacent to a road while she was pregnant. She acknowledged that she kept up her daily pack of cigarettes and 6 or 8 drinks. It took her 5 years to learn about baby Theresa. According to her, Lieutenant's biological father claims he was unaware she was even carrying the child. Then, in March 2021, Karen Lieutenant was taken into custody. Her attorney stated that the case involved a stillborn child, which was always tragic for the parents involved, as explained by the district attorney. He further mentioned that more information regarding the case would become known throughout the legal procedure. He stated that he was constrained in what he could say on Miss Lieutenant's behalf due to the ethical regulations governing attorney statements while an ongoing case was still pending. He requested the community to respect Ms. Lieutenant's privacy because everyone was deemed innocent by law. Lieutenant entered a guilty plea to 1 count of concealing the death of her kid in April 2022. There were no medical records of the lieutenant being pregnant, and it was established during the trial that Lieutenant never sought medical attention before or after the baby was delivered. She claimed to have been unconscious for around 15 minutes after the baby was born, during which time she claims to have missed the baby's cries and movement. After that, a sentence hearing was scheduled for August 5, 2022. She could have spent up to 3.5 years in jail and was fined $10,000. The lieutenant received a 6-month jail term and 3 years of probation in September 2022. In the event that the lieutenant is unable to satisfactorily complete probation, the court has imposed a term of 1.5 years in jail and 2 years of probation. Lieutenant was also mandated to receive mental health treatment, pay a $5,000 fine, and perform 60 hours of community service as part of her probation. In 2018, a firefighter who was off-duty discovered the body of an infant that had been floating in the water near the Boynton Beach Inlet in Florida. Due to the fact that the detectives were unable to positively identify the infant, they decided to publish an artist's rendition of what the newborn would have looked like. There was a prize of $10,000 for any information that led to the arrest of the suspect, but none of the leads turned out to be useful. DNA analysis conducted by the Police Crime Lab and the Cold Case Squad in 2022 has led to the successful identification of the newborn girl's biological father. They entered the newborn's DNA into a public database and were successful in locating a near cousin, which assisted in establishing the link to the defendant in the case. The biological father stated that he had no knowledge of the child and that he believed the mother had an abortion. The mother was identified as Akia Singh, a 29-year-old woman who had been at the inlet on May 30, 2018, searching for news articles regarding the baby's finding. The detectives were able to establish that Akia Singh was the baby's mother. She claimed to the investigators that she was unaware that she was pregnant until the day after she gave birth on May 30, 2018, and that she was unsure whether or not the baby was still alive at the time. They reached this conclusion after questioning Singh as well as several of her friends and family members and concluding that Singh was solely to blame for the baby's presence in the Boynton Beach Inlet. Akia Singh was taken into custody for the crime on the 15th of December, 2022. The sheriff of Palm Beach County, Rick Bradshaw, lauded the efforts of his officers but acknowledged that the investigation had an impact on everyone's mental well-being. Betty Rolf, a resident of Appleton, Wisconsin, who was 60 years old at the time of the interview, was characterized as a devoted mother and grandmother who enjoyed baking. Betty was on her way to work at the Country Air Banquet Hall on the 6th of November, 1988, when she was caught in a violent blizzard on the way there, and she was never seen again. The following morning, her lifeless body was discovered close to a railroad underpass just outside of the municipal limits of Appleton. She had been brutally abused, severely battered, and choked during the attack. Detectives were able to recover DNA from her body. However, in 2001, the DNA was used to eliminate the possibility that any member of her family was involved in the crime. The technology that was available at the time was, unfortunately, not sufficiently advanced to allow for the identification of the perpetrator, and the investigation was abandoned. The genetic evidence that was gathered in 1988 was used by police in 2019 to search for prospective relatives of the suspect, and more recently, they were able to narrow down their search to 2 brothers who might be involved. Upon the submission of his DNA sample to the authorities, one of the brothers was found not to be involved in the crime. It was discovered that the other brother, Gene Meyer, had DNA that matched the evidence that was obtained in 1988. Gene Meyer, 66 years old, a resident of Eatonville, Washington, was taken into custody on December 7, 2022, and he was charged with being Betty Rolf's murderer. Meyer had previously called the town of Valders, Wisconsin, home but had relocated to the state of Washington after the murder. He is currently detained in Pierce County, Washington, awaiting extradition to Wisconsin after having been taken into custody there. Following Meyer's arrest, Betty's granddaughter Sue Shrinka shared that she and the rest of her family were in a state of disbelief. They are relieved that justice may finally be served because they did not know if the person guilty had already passed away or had committed other crimes. Therefore, they are relieved. In the year 1980, Mary Robin Walter was a wife, a mother, and a student at a nursing school. She was 23 years old and lived in Great Bend, Kansas. On the 24th of January of that year, officers were dispatched to the Nelson Trailer Park near the airport in Great Bend in response to a gunshot that had taken place there. They found Mary's body when they got to the location. She had sustained many gunshot wounds. The investigators examined a number of persons and collected evidence, but they were unable to gain any meaningful information. The investigation was halted. After obtaining new information and reevaluating the situation, Detective Sergeant Adam Hales renewed the investigation in April of 2022. It was now very clear to him that some of the material had been missed when it was first looked over. In October of 2022, additional evidence was uncovered. However, the authorities chose not to make it public. Stephen Hanks, 68 years old, a resident of Burden, Kansas, was taken into custody on December 8, 2022, in connection with the investigation. At a press conference, Barton County Sheriff Brian Bellendier disclosed the arrest that had been made. According to Bellendier, this is thought to be the oldest homicide arrest in the state of Kansas, with the suspect being 42 years and 10 months old. After the incident, an investigation was conducted into Stephen Hanks as a possible suspect, but the case was eventually dropped. Bellendier did not offer a possible motive. Because of his involvement in another crime, Stephen Hanks served time in prison. In 1981, he was taken into custody and accused of a variety of crimes, including assault, battery, robbery, and burglary. He was found guilty in 1983 and released from prison in 1993. Leslie Sprague, Mary Robin Walter's niece, replied to the new development in the case by delivering a statement on behalf of the family. She thanked the investigators for their work in bringing the perpetrator to justice and praised Robin's beauty, saying that it wasn't just on the outside but also on the inside. In addition, she mentioned that the passing of Robin had a tremendous effect on their lives and that the news of the arrest was bittersweet to hear. Leslie addressed the fact that many of the people who knew Robin was no longer alive and hence would not be able to share in the group's relief that the investigation was finally drawing to a close. Thanks for staying with us till here. Take care.